Good morning. It is 9:30. Welcome to the May 1st meeting, 2024. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting of council by attending the meeting in person at the Ilderton Community Centre located at 13168 Ilderton Road, or in online. So it's live streamed on our Middlesex Centre YouTube channel, and you can also contact the municipal clerk to receive a registration link to join the meeting electronically. Municipality of Middlesex Centre recognizes that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people on this land and are committed to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect. Our neighboring First Nations, which continue to live as sovereign nations, include the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. There are no additions to our agenda today, so I'm going to look to members of council. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. We do have a delegation today. The Middlesex County CAO is joining us, and I'm going to go join him. So I'm going to yield the chair to Deputy Mayor Brennan, and you can take it from there, sir. Oh, okay, stay there.
You can stay there. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is our annual visit from the CAO in the morning to Middlesex County, from Middlesex County, and give you an update, council and staff an update on what's happening there at the county. So we'll let them do the presentation, and you can ask questions afterwards. So I'll turn the floor over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And so he's already set the stage, really. It's our annual visit, and this is really the first time we've done an annual visit since COVID started. So it's a little bit different than what you may remember from last term. So we come out to the local councils. We want to make sure you're up to date on initiatives that the county is working on and a lot of the updates that you might be interested in. So it's been a lot of change. We've been looking at a lot of demographic change across the county, just the same way as we've been experiencing here at our local municipality. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk about the highlights and our commitment to serving our communities and make sure that you've got the source for all information and questions. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Anna. The real reason that we come out to talk to you is, as Ina said, to give you information, but also because we recognize that you folks are asked a lot of county questions whenever you're out and about, and we want to make sure that you can be advocates and have that information. And if you don't have any information that you need about what's going on at the county, then I think your first stop is John and Ina, who are great resources about what's going on. And then on the last page, we have email addresses if that is, if you need even more information past that. But we want to start today by giving you some information that's financial and just talking about our budget, because that's always something I think that people ask about. And in general, we'll just move forward one slide there, I think. And in general, I would say that about the budget and finances generally, if you, whatever measure you look at, whether you look at reserves, whether you look at tax rates, whether you look at our debt, whether you look at any type of financial information, county, we're in an outstanding position. This is something that I'm really proud of, is that county council has made a lot of amazing business decisions over the years that have put us in this position, and we're in a very strong financial position. And why is that really important? It's important because, as Ina said, things are changing so fast compared to the way they were changing, that we have to be ready. And thankfully, we're starting from a fantastic foundation. The budget work that we did this year is a good example of that. A very reasonable tax rate increase, in my view, that keeps us as, we don't have the chart here today, but we do have a chart in some of our presentations that compares county tax rates across southwestern Ontario, and this keeps us, if not the leader of the pack, then certainly at the forefront of having one of the lowest tax rates in Ontario for counties. So just moving ahead to talk about some of the things that are happening we've been really planning for a change that's been happening at a regular pace for a long time. And that's just part of what all of us do here. But what's been happening lately, as Ina mentioned, is the pace of change has increased dramatically. And with that, with what's happening out in the county, and it's not only just in Middlesex Center, across the entire county, we're seeing growth and change that is unprecedented. And why it's different in Middlesex Center, I think, than it is in some other municipalities is um, you have been growing consistently at a steady pace for this whole time, but you can imagine the shock to the system whenever you have planning applications that would literally double the size of Elsa Craig, or literally double the size of Park Hill. That's a lot of change that's happening compared to the change that you kind of have been used to for more than a decade. So we have many municipalities in the county that challenged by just how fast this is happening. And certainly at the county level, I think we're at a good foundational point to be helpful with all of this change, but we still need to address what's going on out there. And one of the things that's really important to me is we look at how economic development is going to happen. Michael and I talk all the time about the need to balance off our assessment. We're frankly fantastic at residential assessment, but we really are not great at industrial and commercial. If you look at the profile of this municipality, you look at the profile of the county as a whole, it is not a sustainable, in the county, it's definitely not a sustainable assessment mix. And so we need to focus on that. We need to put more investment and more money into that. And one of the ideas I had for how we could do that is to look at having an economic development corporation. And Michael's been good enough to help us with some of the thinking around this. But really, we need a new strategic approach to how we're going to approach economic development and assessment growth for industrial and commercial going forward. So that's something that we're actively working on this year and investing in. Development charges is another thing that came out of our budget discussions. We talked a lot about municipal economics. In the days prior to just even this year, we had a pay-as-you-go system almost. We look at something like a roundabout on Glendon Drive and say, okay, well, we have the finances to go and just pay for that. But that's not really the fairest way to do it from a municipal economic point of view. And so we're looking at development charges where growth can pay for growth. And instead of that burden being across the entire tax base. So for the first time it's been 26 years for me here, the first time in county's history, we're looking at development charges strictly for transportation items. And so that report is coming up as well. I think that report will be something you'll see in the summer. And then the county loan program started. It was one of the first things I worked on whenever I arrived here all those many years ago. And it came out of the annexation. Council at the time, county council, was really worried about the loss of residential assessment. And we put in place this county loan program to help with the development of residential attraction. And we were way too successful at that, as we have now been overrun, I would say, by people that want to move here. And that's by any measure you look at, you can see the demand is very high for residential. But now we're refocusing it on growth for long-term assessment diversification to industrial and commercial, and maybe looking at how that can be used as part of our economic development program as opposed to supporting more residential assessment. You know, if you think about just where we were, even just looking back in my calendar, because I hadn't done this yet, but I looked back and it was only 9 years ago that we were going around to some municipalities in Middlesex County giving resident attraction workshops. And I wouldn't even think about getting out of bed to go do one of those right now because we don't need to. But 9 years ago, we were worried about loss of banks and loss of schools and loss of everything in some of our small communities, and just trying to keep the population up. But that's how far we've come, that we're seeing in every one of the stops we make, we're seeing new planning applications from our smallest municipalities to our largest municipalities, to the point where it's just really changing our demographic. And how is it? There's some more details here on economic development and some of the work that they're doing, but how is that demographic changing? It's really changing on two polar extremes. If you look at our numbers across the county, I'm not really sure about Middlesex Center's numbers specifically, but if you look at the polar extremes that we're experiencing across the county, it's really in that younger family, that one child under 5 category, that 25 to 35 category, we're blowing the doors off of getting that type of family or that type of demographic into the county. And then also the polar extreme, which is your 65, 75, and 85-year-old that's moving here, that sold their house somewhere else, and they're moving here as well. So we have these two polar extremes. Now, why is that? Why are those two polar extremes important primarily for the county? Well, because that traditionally is the sweet spot for county services. We don't, and for county services, if you think of the bundle of services that we provide, 30 some services we provide, that middle group is not a big consumer of those. But that early group and that late group go to libraries. That early group and that late group use social services and nursing homes and social housing. That early group and late group are vulnerable populations often that use transit. And I can keep going down the list. That is the sweet spot. But if you deliver human services, early group and the latter group are the ones that use services the most at the county level. So this meant we had to do almost everything different. Those two polar extremes have changed. Our demographic profile used to look like this, and now it looks like this. And that is quite a shift that's happened all within the last 5 years. And we started to see it early with Lucan to be the place to go if you're a family with a young child. That was a place that was one of the fastest growing for that demographic, and it just hasn't stopped across the entire county. So there's some investments that we're making there in social services, economic development, and of course Middlesex County Connect to try and help with all of that, those demographics. And then there's a slide there about planning and development, and that just is some more stats to show just how fast the pace of change is happening in this area. And I said to Paul that I think Dirk must have bought him lunch because there's a couple of planning development slides here. So you can read those at your leisure, but there's a lot of information about some of the new initiatives, including something at the very end about how we've been working with Middlesex Center on their official plan. So there's a slide about that as well. And then when you think about demographics for the changes that are happening, and Frank and I had a conversation not that long ago just about what's happening in land ambulance. And again, this is the fastest growing service we have. It's one of the fastest growing services in the province. And why is that? Demographics is one for sure, because that's the sweet spot of ambulance, is that young and the old and demographic. And when you look at that group, it's not only that group that's demanding new services from ambulance, it's also the pace of change that's happening in complexity of calls. So it wasn't that long ago that if you said, "Bill, what's the average ambulance call look like?" In the last decade, I would have been able to say to you, "Oh, well, Johnny hurt himself playing hockey and he broke his arm and we're taking him to the hospital." That was kind of the average call. Now what we're talking about is a 4 to 5 hour call that will involve offload delays at the back end. And in the early end, it'll involve maybe a drug challenge, a mental health challenge. These are incredibly complex calls that are happening not only just in urban environments, in downtown London, they're happening in suburbs, they're happening in the county. And then all the challenges that are related to homelessness and making sure that those people stay healthy. So we spent a lot of money addressing those complex challenges, and there's the home programs one, community medicine is one that if you ever are in front of somebody that's a minister, and if you don't know about this program, find out. But we need more and more advocates to talk about the value of community paramedicine out there, and especially for communities of this size and this demographic and this distance to services. The community paramedicine program is something we've invested heavily in. My mother just lives down the street, and they're active at Vintage Green all the time. But the whole goal is to try and keep people from having to enter into the primary healthcare system. And that community paramedicine system is amazing, and I hope the province keeps investing in it. But when I started in the county, if you take even in 2000, if you look at the size of the entire county and the services we provided, total number of employees and the budget in 2000, that's even after the downloading from the province in 2000. The size of the ambulance budget and the size of the number of employees is bigger than that now, just that one department. So that just tells you how much growth we've had. And from 2018 to now, that growth has been a real multiplier in terms of service demand that's out there. There's some stories there about what's going on in Middlesex County Library, and then there's a final page that talks about some local initiatives. I already mentioned the effective plan, and then the work that the IT service. Everywhere we go, we hear good things about the work that the IT service is doing and the planning group are doing, and those local services I think are being really well received by folks. And then there's a note there about what's going on at the local library, at one of the local libraries, and our email addresses if you have even greater questions that we aren't able to answer today, but we'd be glad to answer your questions, John, if there are any.
Thank you, Bill. At this time, I'll turn to council. See if anyone has any questions about that. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Bill. I was just wondering if you could just talk a little bit in more detail when you talked about, like, for example, the roundabout, if you had the money today to do it versus, talk about what that exactly means and the difference that it is, please. Thank you.
Sure. So I would describe our system before as partly a prepay system for things that we see in terms of growth. Of course, you can't predict everything in terms of growth or what's needed, especially in this environment. It's happening at a really fast pace. And so we changed our model from a pay-as-you-go system where in the simplest form might be, okay, we need a roundabout that is, and you know, Sue, how expensive those can be. We need a roundabout. So let's budget for it in this year. That's the system that we used before because we were able to in such a strong financial position. But now what we're seeing is the pace of growth is happening so fast. And there's so many of these things on the horizon that will be impossible. You'll weigh down the taxpayer of that current year enormously if you do that. So we're doing what almost every other municipality does now. There is amortizing that over a longer period of time so that the use of the whatever item we're talking about gets matched to the depreciation of that. And so that's a different financial philosophy than we've used before. And that's really what we're talking about. So that now whenever we have development charges, that's one way to do that. Using some debt financing to do that over a longer period of time so that the taxpayers of 2024 aren't paying for a bridge rehabilitation that's going to be used for 80 years. That's spread out over that time period. That's really what I was trying to say, Sue.
Thank you. So it's not, you don't see it that it's delaying projects.
Okay, quite the opposite. Well, we really haven't had any delays that are financial related. Most of our delays come from just getting everything coordinated in a two-tier system, in a four-tier system, because you have federal, provincial, local, and county. And Michael and I spend a lot of time talking about how we can coordinate all of our projects. And then the fifth layer is really around the infrastructure in the ground. You got to remember about all of that that's going on. So that's really the only times we see delays. It wouldn't be for financial in the past or in the future. But what this is going to do, the costs of everything are spread out to each of the taxpayers that are using it over time.
Couple of questions for you, Bill. Last year's budget was high due to the high cost of land ambulance. Now your budget is back to what I would say normal. So can you talk about has anything happened there? Like there have been some articles coming out of Toronto and a different approach, but I'll leave that with you to talk about it.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. Let's just talk about last year for a second. I think what we got caught off guard with was just how much the pace of change in land ambulance happened kind of all at once. And so you might argue, well, we should have known. The projections really for call volume showed one thing, and we just were like double-digit percentages higher than that. And that cost has to come from somewhere. And then when we mixed in the call volume increases, which really turned into, we were going like this. I always call it the hockey stick diagram to Ina. Like it was going like this, and then it went like that. And why did it go like that all of a sudden in terms of call volume? Well, with a lot of people that moved here, we saw what's going on, not only into the county, but also into the city. And when you match those demographics on the two polar extremes, that's the story. And the same thing was happening at the hospital. They were getting overrun by all the cases that they were having to deal with as well, and that led to increased offload delays. So then, you and I have talked about this. I started ringing the alarm bell last year around September, and I said, "Look at here's what I'm seeing in offload delays. We're now seeing this into the realm of where a 10-hour offload delay is not an abnormality. That is starting to become something that we see all the time back in that September time period." And so I did something I don't usually do. I went to city council and I said, "You need to ask the hospital to come here, and you need to have them stand in front of you and tell you why this is happening and why they're not fixing it. Because this is a form of downloading, one. That's a huge financial burden that municipalities have to take on. And you saw it in their budget last year, Frank, you're right. But it's also about care and service and about all the bad things that go with having 10-hour offload delays. And so that really, I think that got a lot of attention. And to their credit, the London Health Sciences Center said, okay, yeah, let's figure out what we can do about this. And so Ina and Kathy and a bunch of others started advocating along with the city at the hospital about this isn't sustainable. What I told them was, I'm budgeting for last year's offload delays. But what I'm seeing is the offload delays are still increasing. They were still ramping up. So I'm going to be coming back to you in August and saying, I need more money just to have the paramedics sitting there waiting, because this is keep going this way. At the very least, can you guys flatline it at what I call the difference between terrible and really bad? Like, can you at least flatline it at really bad? Because the offload delay for an ambulance is supposed to be under 30 minutes. Anything you get to that's above 30 minutes isn't technically an offload delay. But when you're seeing hours and hours and hours and hours, it's just not sustainable, and especially when it continued to grow. So to their credit, I think we'll have the same message. There's a lot of advocacy that went into this, but they have done a lot of work. And the outcomes aren't as important. The outcomes are starting to look really positive, that at least we're flatlining, going back to where we were in April of last year. And you might say, well, great, it's just back to, that's a huge improvement, because we were on a moonshot for an area that just wasn't affordable for anybody. And so the effort they've put into this is what I really applaud, because they don't have to. They could just look at their own operations and say, we're just going to keep doing what we do, and hopefully the province will give us more money, but that's not the approach they took. So I applaud them for that. And we're working with them every day on trying to make that better and better as we go forward, not only for patient outcomes. Because the last thing I want, the last thing we need is for people to lose faith in the system. Because if they think, I'm not going to call an ambulance because I know I'm going to be an offload delay, sit there for 10 hours, and they do something else, that just would give me nightmares. And so we collectively rely on the hospital to help us get that faith back into the system around how they're going to be dealt with.
Thank you. That's a good explanation. We need to know that stuff. I don't know if personally throwing more money at healthcare is the answer. We also have to change the way they do stuff. So it's probably a combination. Second question is, there's more buzz now about Middlesex County Connect, the bus service. People seem more interested in it. Hopefully ridership is up. I think it's heavily subsidized by the province, is it? So maybe can you talk about that bus service?
I need more to use it.
Yeah, I've actually been on a couple of buses now. You're absolutely right. There is a lot of money that has floated. Was 1.5 million 2018 to 23, and then we got 927,000, I think, for the next 2 years. And we have an extension of almost 300, right? So, but that funding ends in April. So that money has been allocated to the original 2 routes, and most recently the 3rd route, which connects Middlesex County with St. Thomas through London and the transit hub. So, sorry, what else It is, and I mean, you need seed money to get going. I don't think it can stop there though, because the operating costs and there's a critical mass that you need for transit to even start paying for itself. And I don't know that anyone in the province has ever reached that, even transit in Toronto, in terms of subways and buses and so forth. But the thing is, this is part of the solution in terms of getting people where they need to be for appointments. And so it's related to healthcare, it's related to mental health and wellness, connections for community members. So the library and the recreation center are end stops for the bus in Thames Center. If people want to visit a nursing home, that's on the way. If they want to go anywhere in the city, they can get on and off at the transit hub. Shopping. Oh, and the other thing, of course, I forgot completely. It's totally related to what Bill said about economic development. Part of the route, that route touches Wilton Grove and all of the plants, Maple Leaf, for example, out there. Employers are looking for people. People are looking for places to live that are reasonably priced. So connecting where they can afford to live to jobs, making sure that employers get the tick in the box, they get a job. All of these are kinds of virtual cycles because the needs of the society, the community, people are being met. So I don't know how we can continue without, I mean, money is, it's tight for everything. You have to make good budget decisions, but I can't see that this can stop. So we have to keep advocating to make sure that this continues, especially now that we also see a curve. The ridership curve is increasing. More and more people are aware of it. More and more people are planning for it. As an example, there was a student, I guess it was in Thorndale, but that route was cut because it wasn't very active. But people are starting to think that it's easier to have their child go to school, Fanshawe, Western, colleges, anything. If they can stay at home, that cost of going in on a bus, it's you can't compare it. So there are a lot of, it's not a simple problem, but funding is going to be an issue. And I think we just have to keep advocating. I don't have answers for it. I know there's demonstrated need.
Well, I'm hoping that, we continue with it because it takes time to build ridership for sure. I think it's a good initiative. So it's just a lot of people don't understand when they ask me questions. Well, why don't you add this on? Why don't you add that on? And I go, well, you realize it's not sustainable yet, and it's dependent on provincial funding.
Sure. And I mean, as employers notice that it's there and actually get involved in supporting and calling for it, that's a good thing. And the other part is too that in Toronto during COVID, even they're struggling to get that ridership back. And that's in a world where work has changed. So this isn't going to go away, and it's not a simple problem. And everyone's got issues with it, but you're right. We can't just not do it.
The other thing too, Frank, just about that is that it's a proof of concept, right? It's really about really seeing whether that's there. And I've never been a believer that a big bus running down a long route in Middlesex County is the ultimate solution. It's just, that's not sustainable. But that's the option that the province gives you with the funding. And we're trying to prove a concept that this is necessary and needed. And it's even needed more, as Ina said, now than it was pre-COVID and pre our residential expansion. And so if we can prove this concept and then go back to them with, okay, what about a hybrid model that does this? Or what about on these routes we do this? I think that the demand is there both from the employers. So much has changed about transit that I think the demand is there from the residents and from the employers that they're not going to allow us to have nothing as a solution. We just need to find the right solution, and we're not there yet, but we'll get there.
Well, thanks to both of you.
So, I think it was, anyways, our model is one. I can think of at least 4 other areas in Ontario that are trying different models. Some of them are on demand, some of them are routes with extension. So to Bill's point, I think by the time some of that research is done across Ontario in different ways, using technology, buses, different models, we maybe can come up with a solution that works.
Anyone else for council have any questions? Staff will give you an opportunity. Oh, sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
Through the deputy mayor to Bill, on the one page it talks about economic development, a foreign direct investment strategy. What is meant by that? Like, are you talking about like the batteries, the EV batteries, or is there something else?
Yeah, there's quite a program actually, the foreign direct investment program. So It's something that Kara's been working on for a little while. Maybe what I'll do is even give you even more detail about it. I'll send it to you. We'll send it to you in the follow-up so that you get the details, the real details of the program, because this is something we're really proud of, and we think it dovetails into the whole economic development corporation concept as well. So we'll follow it. We always do a little follow-up letter from INA to council. And we'll include all the details of the foreign direct investment program in there too, so you can learn more about it there.
Anyone else from council have any questions? Staff, would you like to ask any questions? Seeing none, we certainly appreciate you and I'm taking the time to come and talk to us today. It's a good day. The sun's shining, the Maple Leafs won last night. And if you're welcome to stay, go if you want. If you have to go, we understand that. Some tidbits over there. We've got a couple more in. But,
I'll go get ready for the Knights to win. That's where I'll go.
but we will take just a quick 2-minute recess and give the word a chance to get back into the mayor's chair. Thank you.
We're live? Okay, I've got the fellows up. So the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes. The motion before us is that the minutes of Middlesex Centre Council meeting held on April 17th, 2024 be adopted as printed. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Shipley and Councillor Burrs, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Now we can move on to the consent agenda. We have 8 items listed here. These are typically received in one motion, and council members may request that one or more item be removed for further action or discussion. Is there anything here that anyone would like to speak to or poll for discussion? I don't see any hands. In that case, the motion before us is that consent items 7.1 through 7.8 listed on the May 1st, 2024 agenda be adopted as recommended. Could I have a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Cates and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Alrighty, now moving on to staff reports. The first item up today is with respect to our environmental services, and Eric Chaudhry, Environmental Services Manager, is going to talk to us about SCADA system upgrades. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you. Environmental Services is seeking council, mayor, and the clerk's approval for the sole source awarding of SCADA upgrades to Aramosa Engineering in the amount of $275,231. This is based upon Section 34 of the procurement policy, that the municipality may conduct a single source procurement process where there is more than one source of supply in the open market, but only one source is recommended due to predetermined specifications. Middlesex Centre, and specifically the Environmental Services Department, and Aramosa have a long-standing relationship that dates back to 2021 when we underwent the SCADA roadmap. And the SCADA roadmap was done by Aramosa, and it's a project that identified the current state of our existing SCADA system at the water and wastewater facilities, and then outlined 10 projects over the next 10 years to allow for the modernization of our SCADA system. We've already completed 2 critical component projects with Aramosa on the upgrades to the SCADA system. And then this one will be the next phases, one of the next phases that are fundamental to bringing the modernization of the SCADA system up to current standards. It includes the upgrading of the Kamoka SCADA in particular. That will be include the purchasing of hardware, software, and then integrating the old system into these new hardware and software components. And then we'll have, that's called the integration of it. And then there'll be a mapping of all the systems into the new system. And then they'll do training and programming at the back end of that as well, in testing of the system. So I'm strongly recommending that this project be sole sourced to Aramosa due to the long-standing relationship and Aramosa's intimate understanding of our SCADA system going forward, and being a partner with Aramosa going forward. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Okay, thank you for that report. Before we get into discussions and questions, I'd like to table the motion. And that is that report PWE 2024 regarding the Kamoka SCADA system upgrades award be received, and that the Kamoka SCADA system upgrades be awarded to Aramosa ACIMA Plus Company in the amount of $275,231, excluding HST. And further, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary contract documents. Okay, have a mover, please, Councillor Cates and Councillor Burrs. And I'll look to council now for discussion. Councillor Burrs, you can start us off.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, to Eric. So the one issue with sole sourcing is the price for it. So you took that into consideration, obviously. So they have the skill set, you work with them, everything's good there. Can you talk to that? Do you think it's fair?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the price is fair. I have reached out to other integrators just to get a sense of where they would fall with this. The thing with the sole sourcing to Aramosa is if we did secure another integrating company to do this kind of work, they would have to step back further to where Aramosa is right now and understand the current system to the level that Aramosa does. It's a very technical field of expertise that an integration company just can't come in and start from where Aramosa left off. They have to understand all the background. And Aramosa has been in this field for well over 20 years. They're a very well-known and very reputable company that works with major municipalities throughout Ontario as well as internationally.
Thank you, Eric.
Anyone else? I don't see any hands. In that case, I can call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you for that report. And now we can move on to the adoption of the transportation plan. And Andrew Giesen, Manager of Transportation, is in attendance to give us the report for this one. There you are. Floor is yours when you're ready.
Through the chair, good morning, council, and thank you for this opportunity to present to you today this report for the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan. The Transportation Master Plan process started in June of 2022 and was adopted in principle by council on February 7th of this year. That adoption also kickstarted the 30-day review period. This is a mandatory review period through the Municipal Class EA Act. This review period has now come to a close, and today we will be seeking council's approval and adoption of the municipality's first standalone transportation master plan. Master plans are long-range plans which integrate infrastructure requirements for existing and future land use with environmental assessment planning principles. The Transportation Master Plan sets a vision for transportation services by assessing existing transportation system performance and forecasting future travel demand to develop policies and projects to address transportation needs within the short, medium, and long-range planning horizons. The Transportation Master Plan was built using feedback and consultation with the public, stakeholders, First Nations, and council. These discussions and interactions help shape and guide the vision and goals of the Transportation Master Plan. The Transportation Master Plan also supports the official planning and has consideration for growth within the community over the coming years. This plan will support transportation, including the movement of people and goods by all travel modes, cars, truck, public transit, cycling, walking, and more. Upon adoption of the Transportation Master Plan, staff will look to implement the Transportation Master Plan and use it to provide guidance for long-range planning or improvements to the existing road network, and will assist in the preparation of capital projects to build on the vision and action items identified through public consultation and contained within the master plan. Projects were grouped across 3 planning horizons, short, medium, and long, and all projects identified in the Transportation Master Plan will need budget approval by council through the annual budget process. The adoption of the Transportation Master Plan will ensure a robust, safe, and efficient transportation network that builds on council's strategic plan and Middlesex Center's official plan, providing a long-term blueprint to facilitate budgeting and to help manage growth. I will pause at this time and ask if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you for that report, Andrew. Again, I'd like to table this report and then we'll open it up to discussions. Do I have a mover, please, and a seconder for this? Councillor Shukley and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? Oh, sorry, questions. As I said, we're going to talk about that now. Moving right along. Okay, I'm going to turn to council now, and I'll start with you, Councillor Heffernan. Maybe we'll just work our way around.
Through the mayor to Andrew. I think I've asked this before, but on page 66 of the Middlesex Centre Transportation Master Plan, it suggests that the segment of the former London Huron Bruce Railway between Denfield and City of London is a long-term priority trail, but and it utilizes the southern expanse of the abandoned railway corridor However, most of that trail has been purchased, the land has been purchased by all of the owners along the way. So I'm just curious as to, this specifically says that abandoned trail, abandoned corridor, but I don't think that's realistic. Is there an alternative that you have?
Through the chair to Councillor Heffernan, yes, you're right. The abandoned rail corridor has been sold to private landowners. The intention, the old abandoned corridor back from those private landowners where feasible. Recognizing that there are active agricultural practices ongoing, so it may not be feasible to follow the exact alignment of the old rail corridor. We may have to look at some alternatives, potentially following along road allowances to allow for that connection to be built.
So this possibly would involve expropriation or something like that?
Through the chair, we would certainly look to acquire land amicably, working with landowners. It certainly wouldn't be our intention to use expropriation as the primary means of acquiring land. We would look to do so, mutual agreement.
That's it. Thank you. Oh, Rob, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add a little bit. Andrew and I have discussed this fairly at length. The section to the south seems significantly more feasible than the section to the north, because at least looking from an aerial view, there are substantial sections where the rail corridor, although privately owned, is not actively being farmed yet. So in my opinion, if this is something that council wants to see move forward, that it would be better that we start approaching landowners sooner than later before anybody converts any of that old rail bed actually into farmable land again. I'm gonna say maybe 75% of it, something like that, is still vegetated and probably still has the old structure there and is actively farmed. And even where it is actively farmed, you still, I think to the south, you think you entirely have property lines that follow the old rail bed. So you wouldn't necessarily be bisecting an active farming operation if the landowners were agreeable to selling a small piece of land. But ultimately, yeah, it's going to come down that we have to acquire the land. Like Andrew said, hopefully through negotiations. And I guess in my mind, it would be cheaper to do so while it's not being farmed than to wait another 10 years or maybe more if it's converted. So.
Councillor Shipley, would you want to ask anything?
That was kind of my same questions that we have. I think if you call it the rail line, but I think we need to start moving forward on this and find out these farmers are willing to do this, because if we're not, we need to move on to something else. And I think the sooner better we get that started. Thank you.
I'll look to others for questions. Nothing? Okay. Well, I would want, just before we call the vote, I just want to comment on the amount of work that has gone into this project. This is many, many, many months of like 2 years worth of work, more than 2 years. And the level of integration and the thinking that's gone into it. There's a lot of reading here. And recycling was just one part of it. We talked to, really what you do have to do is look forward and think about the trends in terms of how people recreate or what they want to do, walk and ride, or can they be connected this way and that way. Can it connect? Was one of the ones that commented on, that was, I think, in the report was everything was documented. So the interest in this, the time and effort is huge. And I think a lot of the report has come from this. And writing documents are always good. It gives you a direction in which to go, and then you can see what makes sense, what doesn't, how do we do it, or what timeframe. So I applaud all staff who worked on this and say thank you for that. So it was the motion before us. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Oh, sorry. I'm going to read back the motion. Is that report to Public Works Engineering, PWE 19/2024, regarding the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan be received, and that Council adopt the Transportation Master Plan as appended to report PWE 19/2024. All in favor? And no one is opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much. And we can go on to item 8.3, which is another large study, the development charges study. And this is Tiffany Barrows Report, Director of Corporate Services. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. And through Mary, so today I'm going to be going through the Development Trade Study Options and Directions report. There's a lot to unpack in this report, so I'm going to try to piece it out in different sections. To begin with, I really wanted to touch on changing the timeline of the study. So the study timeline that was presented earlier this year has been modified. And one of the reasons that we are looking at modifying this is to ensure that we're reacting to this new Bill 185, the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act 2024, that the province has recently introduced. At this time, our current bylaw for development charges expires on July 17th, 2024. So that is a date that we need to make sure that we're cognizant of and we need to work towards. Therefore, the updated timeline has us taking the final development charge study and bylaws to council on July 10th, 2024, which will be a special meeting of this council. The updated timeline is presented below, and if there are any questions on that, please let me know. We were hoping to have the draft report today to start reviewing internally, and then we'll be returned back to Watson's to finally be posted on our municipal website. There are information that we will be talking about today that will make its way into that final report, and that is the reason we're asking for council's direction today. If we do not have consensus on the direction, we can still proceed with the report and continue this discussion with council. Outside the timeline, we do have some different sections that we're looking for council's direction. One that we're not specifically looking for direction on is the section on exclusions. This is something that I would like council to provide any feedback that they have and their preferences. One of the things that we're looking at is excluding certain types of agricultural developments that do not result in incremental service demands and therefore the DC would not be applicable. This is treated separately than exemptions that we've had in the past. So the exclusion specifically, I want that to be very clear. These agricultural development types would not result in incremental service demands and therefore no DC would be applied. Our Director of Vetting Services, Heidi Marsman, is working very closely with the consultants, Watsons and Associates, on coming up with what those definitions would be. And those definitions would have to be very specific to ensure that this is applied correctly and defensible for the municipality. Below in the report on page 3, it does outline what we are looking at. However, these are not finalized at this time, and they will be included in our report. Any feedback on this is always appreciated. Now on to exemptions. There are two types of exemptions. One is the statutory exemptions. Council does not have a say in statutory exemptions. These are coming to us from the province. So I will not be going into depth in the report on those statutory exemptions, but we can explain any of those to council or the public if you have questions on those. Therefore, I'll move on to the non-statutory exemptions. In the 2019 study, Middlesex Center had two non-statutory exemptions that we're really discussing today: the agricultural development exemption and industrial exemption. If council is looking at any additional exemptions, that is something that we need to bring forward to staff as well to investigate. But at this time, I have not heard any feedback from council. Therefore, we will be just concentrating these two. First, I'd like to talk about the industrial exemption. In the 2019 study, we exempted industrial development by 60%. This is outlined below in the report on page 5, and you'll see what those calculations will look like at a 60% reduction. Staff is not recommending that we continue the 60% reduction for an exemption within our development charge study for 2024. Instead, what we're recommending is that there be no exemptions for industrial development in the development charge study. Rather, staff is directed to update our community improvement plan for 2025 that will expand on industrial exemptions for development charges. If we do it through a community improvement plan, this process is more open and transparent. All of those applications would come forward to council, and council would make those public decisions, and you would have that say in every single type of industrial development. You can also develop what type of exemptions you're going to put in place and why, and that can be tied to things like economic development with respect to employment growth. And so that's what we're recommending. However, the information is there. We have put together 3 different options. However, like I said before, exemptions, because they are non-statutory, they're at the discretion of council, can be what council is looking at. So if we are looking at a different percentage, The information is below on a 60%, but I can apply that different percentage to what the calculated rates are. The next would be the agricultural exemption. In our current 2019 study, there are specific agricultural exemptions in place, and they have different percentages that we are exempting. What we're looking at recommending right now is a 25% reduction for agricultural development for protection and services related to a highway. Note, services related to a highway used to be called public works and roads. It's now just been named services related to a highway, and 100% exemption for parks and recreation. The other option is no exemption for agricultural drill. We have limited it to the 25% for those specific categories, as well as 100% for parks and recreation, as we are looking at specific exclusions, as mentioned before, for a lot of those agricultural developments that would not provide any result in any incremental service demands. However, if you have a different percentage in mind, similar to the industrial, the calculated rate is there, and we can apply that percentage. Those would be the exemption summaries. The other item I wanted to mention, which I feel like is providing a little bit of confusion, is the differentiated charge versus the uniform charge. So there are two options for calculating non-residential development charges that were being considered as part of the 2024 development charge study. We have gone back and forth on what would be the best choice for Middlesex. At this time, we are recommending that we stick with our historical practice and using that uniform calculation. The uniform calculation simply means that we're using the same calculation for all the different development types that fall into the non-residential development. That includes your industrial, your agricultural, and other non-residential, which would be commercial and institutional. That's the uniform. If you're looking at differentiated, all that means is that the way you calculate the different types is a different calculation. And that would be based on anticipated capital needs and development densities. However, at this time, we are recommending you stick with the uniform approach. However, this is council's decision. One other item I wanted to mention, it relates to the Bill 185 that I mentioned earlier in the report. There's a lot to unpack with Bill 185. Some of the changes, actually the majority of the changes that we're looking at related to development charges are very positive for our municipality. They're looking at removing the phase-in. So at the current time, one of the statutory exemptions is the phase-in of 80% for the first year, and that will slowly decrease over the next 5 years. That 20% that we would not be charging, the taxpayers of this municipality would have had to have funded. This is one of the reasons we have that, like we're looking at developing a development charge exemption reserve fund. The government is looking at removing that. That's a very positive thing for our municipality. The other thing, part of that Bill 185, is the major studies. In 2019 development charge study, we have a category called major studies. It funded things such as the development charge study, or our transportation master plan, or roads need studies. Those studies that are used to inform us about the costs and the plans related to growth in the future, as well as it also talks about some benefit to existing. That's why they're not always 100% funded by DCs. As part of the last change, I believe it was Bill 23, those were removed. We have, as staff, prepared what those would look like for the 2024 study. Our council has not seen those, and those have not been included in the rates. However, Bill 185 proposes that those major studies come back. I want to remind you, so if you're looking at the rate right now, we will change if Bill 185 receives relevant and we include major studies. That will also impact our agricultural exemptions. In the past, this was something that we had as part of that agricultural exemption. What we'd be doing and presenting to council, we'd be applying the same rate. So if we go with that 25% exemption to major studies as well. I cannot present that at this time because major studies are not included in development charge studies until Bill 185 receives relevant. So that would be also some more information that we have to make sure that we are aligned with. At this time, I will open up to questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's table the motion that report CPS 24, 2024 development charge study options and directions be received, and that other non-residential development charges be calculated using the uniform method, and that there is no exemption provided for industrial development types as part of the development charges study, and that staff be directed to update the community improvement plan for 2025 to include a development charge grant related to industrial development types, and that staff are directed to provide an exemption for agricultural development types in the 2024 development charge study at 25% for protection and services related to a highway and 100% exemption for parks and recreation. And further, that staff be directed to continue working with Watson and Associates on definitions for exclusions for specific agricultural development types that do not result in incremental service demands for the development charges study. We will please Councillor Burrs and Councillor Cates. Thank you. I'll look now to Council to ask questions. The floor is yours, Deputy Mayor.
Not so much a question to Tiffany, but taking a look at this, I think it's a good compromise what you're talking about here. I think some of the things that we're taking right out of development charges for agriculture, then we don't have to do the exemptions if they're not even in there, and then the exemption part's another thing. But I think it's a good trade-off that you've done here and what you're looking at, and I think it's something we can work with going forward. So I appreciate that.
Councillor Burrs next.
Yeah, I would echo what the deputy mayor said. It's a good compromise. Nothing's perfect it's not an exact science, development charges. I think this strikes a good chord. I like the fact that with industrial types, if a major company comes here and come to council, we will decide what we want to give them, which I think is perfect rather than trying to define it. I'd also like to say that a lot of work and thought went into this. I agree with us continuing with Watson and Associates. I've been impressed with them over the years. I think they're one of the top municipal economic advisors out there. So I support the report as issued. I have just a comment, kind of a shot at the provincial government. Bill 23 was rushed in. I won't use the word crap, but I did in there. But now 185 is reversing some of the negative parts. Maybe they could have thought about Bill 23 before they rushed it and did that. And the interesting thing is the Minister of Municipal Affairs was a municipal mayor and should have known better. That's it. There's my soapbox thing.
And I have Councillor Ernst.
Whoops. I have something.
Through the Madam Mayor, me and Tiffany, we've had quite a bit of back and forth on the agricultural DCs. And I appreciate what's been accomplished, but I'm still got quite a few issues when they're basing it on employment growth. Watson's using projections instead of historical, which are not close at all. According to their study, every 325 square meters is one new employee. In the past 5 years, it took 8,500 square meters to have one employee. So, like, I'm conflicted what to do. Like, I know it's still a work in progress, but I still think there's got to be more work done. And I know I probably won't get everything that I want, but I still think that the employment for primary is not right. And there's one study will say this, one study will say that. There's not even a consistency in the Watson reports. So that's my spiel.
Is there anyone else? I don't see hands. I'm just going to make a comment again. Again, a lot of work has gone into this. I think staff has been hearing our concerns and questions. I echo the deputy's comments. I see this as sort of I see integrative thinking happening here, and I'm looking forward, and uniformity, bringing council into decision making as it's relevant with the current set of facts each time we have to do things. So the exclusions and exemptions and the adjustments, I think capture the intent and it still upholds the purpose of the documents. So thank you for that report. So we do have a motion before us. We have moved to the second. I'm going to call the vote on that. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we have another item here with respect to Elmhurst Street and Parkland Place serving. And again, we'll have to make some choices. I'll ask Rob Cascan, Director of Public Works, to provide an overview of the staff report.
Thank you. So through Madam Mayor, I'm pleased to provide this report to council. And I will apologize for the spelling mistake. It should say servicing, not serving in the title. So, this report comes out of the OLT decision regarding the proposed development at 610 and 14 Elmhurst Street. The original site plan was made in 2001, and there was a substantial back and forth between the municipality and the developer. As you recall, it ended up going to an OLT hearing, and the OLT provided a decision which provided the rezoning of the site and requires municipal servicing to be brought to the site at the developer's cost. The design of the site, the approach taken was that they are dealing with the stormwater on the site because they did not have a viable outlet for the stormwater, but that they would require both municipal sanitary and water connections to be brought to the site. So through discussions with them, they have provided a high-level cost estimate of what they believed it would cost to extend servicing from Fort Park Drive to the project site, just for the benefit of the development. And we did ask them along the way throughout the design, well, how does that fit in with municipalities' kind of longer term vision, and is there an opportunity here to work together for a larger project? There is a number of houses that front Parkland Place, some side lot onto Parkland Place, and a few lots on Elmhurst that would front the new infrastructure that would be installed, whether it's installed by and only for the development, or whether it's extended into a larger project. The issue is, or one of the issues is that under our current bylaws is that once the servicing is installed and it's owned by the municipality, it's municipal servicing, and under the current bylaws, those residents will be paying frontage charges, whether or not they choose to connect to the servicing. So there's a couple of different options that we looked at. Option one, I'll go through in a little bit more detail, but option one is essentially to allow the developer to proceed with the minimum servicing required to support the development. Option two would be to allow them to proceed with that, but also put in services for the fronting lots, so that they're either there to connect to now or sometime in the future instead of tearing up the road again. Should somebody have a failing septic tank or a well and they want to connect to municipal services. And then option three would be to really extend the scope of the project and kind of take advantage of a joint project where we would actually fully urbanize the road cross section and extend it all the way up Elmhurst. There's some benefits there. It would meet our current design standards if we go that route. It would allow for some future connections, potentially further infill development in the future. We haven't gone to that level of detail. So the original cost estimate, so option one, the developer, based on their opinion of probable costs, their cost estimate was roughly $730,000 only for their portion of the work to complete that and bring servicing to their doorstep. That doesn't include the internal servicing on the site. So that would be obviously disruptive to the residents along there, but they would end up with a 7-meter wide asphalt road, but not to the current design standards because it wouldn't be curb and gutter. So all they would get is a wider asphalt surface. They would still have ditches, no sidewalks, no streetlights. Currently, just for reference, Parkland Place is about 5 meters wide, and Elmhurst is 5 or 6. I think it's 5. Option two would be essentially the same thing, except we would stub in services to all those lots that front, and then that gives us a municipal cost of about $123,000 based on their opinion of probable cost. There would have to be some further discussion whether that's just a cost the municipality bears or whether that's looked at as a local improvement to the residents, and whether or not that cost could be ventured for them on a per lot basis. And then option three would be the full road upgrade. So our rough cost estimate, looking at there's multiple things that kind of drastically balloon the cost. So our cost goes from $123,000 to more in the order of 1.6 million. But there's a lot more that comes out of it. So it would lengthen the project all the way up Elmhurst. So we'd go from, I think the distance is here, but we double the distance on Elmhurst essentially. That would be urbanized. We would also bring in a storm sewer system. There are some technical difficulties with that we have to work through. We had a preliminary look at it. It wouldn't necessarily be a system that would meet our current design because we have a restricted outlet at Westbrook. But about half of the additional cost to fully urbanize and bring storm sewer in is the cost of the storm sewer. But we would also bring in streetlights, sidewalk, and curb and gutter and remove the ditches. So it would be that standard urban cross section that you typically see with street trees and whatnot. One of the benefits that we see, and it's a relatively small portion of the cost, but is that extension of sidewalk and streetlights that we do have a development going in here with, I think it's 44 or 45 units with no sidewalk and currently a 5-meter wide road. That we've been looking at connectivity elsewhere within the settlement areas, and that if we're going to put this number of units in, it only makes sense that there's sidewalk connections to the Kilroy Park Drive. So I'm seeking direction on how council would like to proceed. It is a significant price difference. Long term, I see it as a benefit to go ahead and kind of, quote, bite the bullet and do the full reconstruction at this time, so the servicing is in place, and then hopefully we don't have to go back and touch it for many years. There is some budget. We had included budget in 2024 on the basis of the opinion of probable cost that was provided by the consultant at the time, assuming that we would be providing some cost sharing for some modest servicing, which would be like the stubs and some hydrants. We had also carried in 2025 forecast budget, $500,000, assuming that there may be some further road upgrades that would be coming as a result of this review. So unfortunately, though, we would, based on our current analysis, so we would actually have to increase that 2025 budget of $500,000 to about 1.4 million. So that would be a jump of about $900,000. And again, a large part of that is the storm sewer. We're quite constrained there. And when we get into the detailed design, the intent would be to look and see what we could do with low impact development measures, similar to what the project site has done, and see if we can avoid having storm sewers. But I have a feeling that we would probably end up with a storm sewer, kind of a combination of the two, with a small storm sewer system that would connect on Westbrook, and then some low infiltration to minimize the size of them. From the developer standpoint, I know they would prefer option one, or I'm quite sure they would prefer option one, because they believe that they would be able to move forward quicker, and they would like to get going on this. From the municipality standpoint, if we go with option 3 and turn this into a larger project, we would be looking to put an RFP out for the design for consultant as quick as possible, and hopefully have it awarded in June, get a design this year, and have it ready to be serviced probably in the spring of 2025. If we could move quicker than that, we would be willing to do so, but I think that's probably realistic and would align well with that next budgeting cycle to adjust the budgets as well. So regardless of which option council directs us to move forward with, we would have to enter into a cost sharing agreement with the developer. It would, money's going to flow one way or the other. It's just not which way it is, but we want to iron out some of those details before proceeding as well. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions here.
Thank you for that report. I just have to ask the clerk one thing. We can read that one and just specify.
What I think we should do is have a discussion
First. Okay, that's what I wanted to identify now. Yeah, I just want to be clear how we're going to identify and then tables. So, okay, so clerk recommends that we actually talk first and identify which way we want to go. And then we'll take this, and as that part, we're at the end of that motion, we'll specify the details. Okay, so I'm going to.
Oh, I said that's perfect.
Oh, perfect, okay. Oh, yeah, okay, I don't care which says, and I saw your hand and I was going to call on you. Go, Councilor Arts, take it away.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Rob. I found in the past at home, if I've ever done anything and I tried to do it on the cheap, I ended up spending twice as much money as I should have in the first place. And I believe with this too, if you're gonna rip a road up, you gotta put the lines in, do it right, get it done. I know it's a lot of money, but personally, I would go with option 3. Thank you.
All right, I see two, I'll start with Councillor Hepburn and then move to Councillor Shipley.
To Rob, what is the minimum, for water, wastewater, stormwater? If you're not hooked up, the frontage charge, what does that cost?
So that's for the minute to Councilor Heffernan. The minimum charge, I think, on the water side is $24 plus the infrastructure life cycle renewal. So it's about 42 and change plus tax, and the wastewater would be a little bit higher than that. So probably you're looking at around $100 a month.
Okay, that's part that I think that some of the residents, well, a lot of them will not like, especially if they're happy with the situation they have. However, I agree with Councillor Arts that option 3 is probably the best. Get it done, get it over with. And I think people will actually like the lights and the sidewalks. I know when they put them in front of our house, we were a little bit leery of it, but at the same time, for safety for the kids and that is a huge thing. So.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment regarding the cost, and I guess we have not received any, I guess, support or negativity from residents. I don't know if residents are aware of this yet with the frontage charges, but we have not received any requests from people looking to connect in that immediate area. However, I'll say over the last few years, we have certainly received requests from a handful of people within Old Kilworth that either wanted water connections or had even asked about sanitary. So I know that people may not need it at this time, but at some point, if their sanitary fails or their wells fail, the servicing is there, and it wouldn't be unlike how it was handled previously when the water was extended to the municipality and people had these frontage charges, and some people still do that, chosen not to connect. So.
Councillor Shipley?
Thank you, through the mayor. It's probably more for Tiffany. Tiffany, how would we finance this 1.4 for next year?
So I really on our reserve funds. In place for the specific work that's being done, with respect to the roads or water, wastewater, we would fund from that. We'd update our cash flow forecasting within, like, for the 2025 budget, and it would be part of our projects. We would not be looking at debt at this time for those projects.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brennan?
Through Madam Mayor, Rob, I agree with Councillor Arts. I think your first expense is the best expense to do it properly, but I really like option 3 because it gives us the control. Option 2 gives the developer the control. But option 3, we're in control of the situation. I think that's where we need to be on this. So I'm definitely in favor of option 3.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I agree with option 3, and I like what everybody has said. I think that a couple of other things. I know some people along there that like them well and they like how it is, but at the same time, if your well failed tomorrow, you now have an option. But also, I think as a council, is it not our job to do our very best to provide people with clean drinking water and those assurances that come with all of those services? And why wouldn't we urbanize when we do our infill of sidewalks and streetlights, et cetera? Why wouldn't we take advantage of this and widen the road and be a part of the expansion that, whether we like it or not, is happening there? Thank you.
I think everybody has said what I was thinking. Why do this piecemeal and have to do add-ons later? People will criticize us for that you're putting this thing in here and then you're doing this inadequate thing. So, and costs will probably be higher in the future. If you do this patchwork and we have to go back, I'll bet you the cost will be more so. So go in, do it right, do it at today's prices. And the other comment is, you know, when we deal with property matters or this kind of stuff, you're not gonna make everybody happy. There's gonna be people that don't agree with what you're doing, so we have to look at the fact that we are promoting municipal water and sanitary sewers going forward, and this kind of does that, so I'll leave it there.
I like the council's comments. I'm on the same page. When you talked about infill projects, the first question came to mind was, so what? Are they going to dig a well? How are we going to provide services? I think the 21st century is here. The safety of the water that comes from Lake Huron is guaranteed and monitored, and the problems with wells are increasing across the province. I think taking the long-term doing and redoing never makes economic sense. I've never seen a project where, you know, start small and then just the redo parts just add up in costs. And then there's also difficulty in sometimes how to match things up and changes in supplies and products. It's just get done right the first time and make sure that the services are there and we can tick all the boxes. So I think we have our direction here. So the motion before us is that council report Public Works Engineering 2024 regarding Elmhurst Street and Parking Place reconstruction be received. And the council provides direction with regard to this, and that would be option 3, the full-scale project, integrated thinking project, and as outlined in that report in detail. So with that, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you for the. Oh, I didn't ask for that. Okay, moved and seconded. Everybody would like this. Who wants to? Oh, Councillor Cates, and the seconded, Councillor Heffernan. All right. And we all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can move on to number 9. There are no notices of motion that have been received. So now we can look at correspondence. And the motion before us is that Council of Municipality Middlesex Centre receives the correspondence 10:1 through 10:7 as information. I'll look to councillors. Is there anything anyone wants to comment on, ask about? Yes, Councillor Cates, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The correspondence from the St. Clair Conservation Authority. So I am on the board of there, and I read this report when it was on a recent agenda and discussed it with Rob, and now they've brought it forward to us. I would like to that we pull this. I think that's what it's called. Pull this item, and I want to ask that we. I think that ask staff to. I think that St. Clair should come here and present the options to council and discuss. And I think that Rob and our staff should look at this for our opinions and how much cost is involved for us for the various options of full removal of the dam or in phases or do nothing. So if I can make a motion for that, thank you very much.
Chair, absolutely. I think what you're asking for is that staff be directed to report back with respect to these options. As part of that, we can also liaise with the Conservation Authority and bring in their staff to complement the presentation and information so the council has everything before them. Certainly we can take that as a motion, or simply staff can acknowledge that direction and take that back today. So we'll go ahead and look at the answer on the table and take that back and get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Is there anything else anyone wants to comment on? Councillor Bruce, go ahead.
Well, thank you for providing your report, Mayor. I thought it was helpful what you do. Okay, rather than you reading through it, I always find blue water recycling stuff interesting to read. With the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, maybe I was wrong, but I just thought this was a report suggesting this, and they would come on with more details later. But I don't disagree with what Councillor Cates has proposed. That they got to come on with. We're going to have a cost in there to some degree, I'm sure. But they should come here and we should be able to ask them questions about this removal. Removal of dams is popular now everywhere.
I don't. Let's go ahead, Councillor Shipley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to thank Chief Todd for submitting for this funding for the grant, for the funding for our emergency shelter. Greatly appreciated, and I think that keeps money in the pocket of taxpayers. I don't want for. Thank you.
I don't see any hands. In that case, we have a motion before us that the council receives all of those items as information. Is there a mover, please, and seconder? Councillor Cates, Deputy Mayor Brand, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, the next item is a motion to go into closed session, and that is that council for the municipality of Middlesex Centre adjourn to closed session at 10:55 a.m. pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the following matters. Under section 2E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before the administrative tribunals affecting the community or local board. And this is development litigation matter in Ward 4. 239, subsection 3.1, being an educational or training session. A meeting of council may be closed to the public if the following conditions are both satisfied. 1, that the meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training members. 2, at the meeting, no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter in any way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council, local board, or committee. And this is the legal services overview. Could I have a mover, please, and a seconder? Councillor Shipley and Councillor Cates, all in favor? Okay, and we'll just take a few minutes to make sure we're